Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Examine Life podcast, where we look at life's thorniest questions and try to lead more productive, examined, and joyful lives. I'm joined by Kat Vellos today, and we are going to explore the question, is friendship as hard as we think? How you doing, Kat?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks so much for having me here today.
It is so great to see you, and I'm so excited for our chat today. I'm in my temporary studio in my in-laws' basement, but I shipped a mic over from Amazon, so we're gonna make it happen. And you're looking rad and fresh with your yellow glasses. So,
thank you. I keep a rotating supply of different glasses. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I came to see which color you'd be wearing today." So, yeah, keeping it sunny today.
That's like me with sneakers. So always a different pair of sneakers. I always ask our guests to introduce themselves. And the way I would say it is, you're at your local cafe and you strike up small talk. Someone strikes up small talk with you, introduces, says hello. And how do you introduce yourself in that context?
So this is funny. I have two answers to this question. So one is the standard American default, which is I think when people are introducing themselves, they talk about their work. So in that case, I might be like, oh, my name is Kat and I help adults make and maintain friendships. I help, people make and maintain friendships in adulthood. And they might be like, wait, what? Why is that a thing? And I'd be like, well, it's kind of like a life coach, but specifically focused on this aspect of relationships, which has to do with friendships and community. So some people are marriage coaches, and some people work with you on your business coach. But that's the aspect that I focus on. And then the second answer to this question is that normally, and this might come as a surprise, I prefer to introduce myself not talking about work because, as we may get into later, I have feelings about our most typical small talk questions, including what do you do? And I find it's more of a opening, like a door opens a little bit wider when we talk about things beyond just our work identity. So I might say, oh, my name is Kat. I'm really big into friendship and community, but I'm also a crafter. I'm a maker. I'm a gardener. I love to create things with my hands. I love to plant things. And I love to help get people together to connect with each other. And that is what feels like a fuller, richer, more vibrant way of introducing myself than just my job, which may change from time to time. But those other things about me are true and will remain true probably my entire life.
There's a lot there because this question of identity and our jobs being the containers that define us to ourselves or to many people who we meet, new people who we meet. And I often speak with people who are in transitions, different types of career transitions.
Yeah.
And that question, what do you do is it can hurt. It can feel so painful if you can't put it in that label. What kind of reaction do you when you give the second version, what kind of reactions do you get from people?
People are usually very excited to hear kind of those more juicy details. And what I often do is I ask people some version of a question that elicits that as well. So I might be like, oh, what do you love to do for fun? Or what do you do for relaxation? Or what would you do if you had a whole week off? Because the answers to those kinds of questions will tell you a lot about who somebody is, which is kind of what we're trying to get at when we're like, oh, nice to meet you. What do you do? Our job is a little bit about us, but usually the things that we would opt to do with our free time usually tells us a little bit more.
Yeah.
Or it leaves open the room for a lot more interesting things. You might learn that somebody is writing screenplays in their free time, or they are learning to juggle fire, or they are coaching their kids' soccer team, and they're also learning to brew beer. There's so many cool things. And that may not apply if they're an insurance adjuster as their job.
If I were to ask someone, what do you do on your free time as an opening question?
Yeah.
I don't think I have the confidence. I'm a pretty social, easy to get along with person, but that question to me, and maybe I'm more down the fairway than I think, it actually makes me, it makes me squirmy to think about asking that to a stranger.
What do you do for fun?
Yeah, within 30 seconds of meeting them.
There's different ways you can phrase it. You can put it into your own words. But if it's not comfortable for you, you don't have to do it. But I like to share options for folks who maybe want to switch it up. Maybe they're tired of the regular question. Maybe they don't even like the regular questions. And so they are looking for ways. But there's different ways. You can be like, so, like, what's your jam? What do you do for fun?
Yeah.
What brought you to this area? Or like anything that feels like it would be like your personality, your vibe, that kind of stuff.
No, I love that. And I know that when I was in that phase, when people ask me, what do you do within, and, we moved and we were making all these new adult friends because, our kids were at these kind of juncture points, like kindergarten, where is like a very milestone moment for new adult friends. And not being able to answer the question, what do you do, was so painful. Yeah, because it really shone a light on so many of my insecurities about what I was doing or not doing, or my role in the greater kind of realm of identities. But it was funny that I would lean on things like, oh, I'm fun employed, or I would kind of use a joke to deflect that question. But deep inside, when people ask me about that early time, I almost got a job. I almost went back into the labor market to avoid the question, having to answer the question, what do you do, with some long-winded explanation or something that felt atypical. And so, yeah, that brings me back.
It's real, because there are folks in transition between jobs, or they might be not working because of a disability, or they might have been laid off, or there is so much volatility, I think, also in the world of work, and also people's feelings about work, that it can bring up a lot that can make it a difficult question, even though it's often one of the default kind of beginning go-to questions.
Yeah. Thank you for coaching me, for hearing me through that, because you brought me back to some of my weaker moments, or more insecure moments, through the lens of identity, which I'm sure we'll circle back on. But so let's look at today's question, right? And the question is friendship as hard as we think? And before we jump in, to share with our listeners, we ask these questions in our community in a different group coaching program. So if you would like to discuss questions like this, check out radreads.co/coaching. And so today we're going to talk about, is friendship as hard as we think? And I actually wanted to kick us off with, I did a quick search back into the days of Aristotle. And I remembered reading, I don't read a lot of ancient Greek philosophy, but I remembered that Aristotle had laid out. So I had it on my screen here. He had 3 levels of friendship. And so the 3 levels were utility friends, which were friendships based on mutual benefit or usefulness to each other. There were pleasure friends, friendships based on fun and enjoyment on each other's companies. And virtue friends, friendships based on mutual admiration and respect for each other's character and virtues, the highest form of friendship. And in this realm of friendship, you are committed to flourishing. You're committed to helping your friend flourish as they are reciprocating that commitment to you. And it's a beautiful lens of friendship. So you, though, are the expert on friends and all things friendship. When you hear that, the word friendship, how do you think of the definition to get us started?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that Aristotle piece, and I love it so much, because it captures so many of the different ways that we experience friendship, particularly during, as we talked about a lot about work already, our working lives often tend to be those, they may seem more like utility friendships, like colleagues kind of feel like utility friendships. And when I hear friendship, where my mind and heart goes is often to that third category of, those virtue friends, those true heart friends, those ones that you love in this really mutually beneficial, reciprocal way, where it's really just based on like your soul and spirit, like really connecting. And really it's a type of love, right? With the other person, it's platonic love. And so that's what I think about when I think about friendship is that kind. But of course, it doesn't mean that that's the only kind we need in our life. We also do need casual friends and pleasure friends and utility friends and colleagues and acquaintances and casual friends. Like there's so many different kinds.
It's an interesting way to think of the continuum of friends, because I might think of it in through my own lens. There were, and I think this will be common probably for men, but maybe for many listeners, is that there were friendships around shared experiences. And for a lot of my peers and men, it was around sports, drinking, and work, right? And so that was the kind of the core. If I look at a lot of friendships, not all, but a lot of them, we're still talking, it's the old trope of like, remember that time when we did this over spring break, and they're beautiful, but you reach a point where they are a little that you can only talk about, sophomore year spring break so many times, right? You kind of eventually you need to
take like a mid-40s spring break or something to freshen it up.
Exactly. And to be fair, a lot of it is anchored by drinking. At least in my peer group, the men that are, my friends. And when the drinking slows down because of age, because of kids, because of health concerns, because of, liking sleep more, that common thread of experience gets pulled away.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I know I'm 44, and I know that a lot of my men friends who are men and other men in my peer group are really kind of struggle. They're a little bit lost because the anchor of the shared experience, again, usually around alcohol / sports, has kind of been pulled. It's been taken away.
Yeah.
And so now I would say a lot of my friends who are guys or men are a bit lost with friendships.
And what is the thing that brings you together at this new phase?
I think that in this new phase, a lot of it is kids. What has happened in my life and in the life of many of my peers is that you get really, it's kind of a bit of the track, right? You work your butt off, you're single, you're still doing stuff with your buddies, and then you meet your spouse, you get married, you have kids, you kind of mid-30s, 40s, what have you. And then you spend this like 10-year period just kind of in the black hole of parenthood, of early parenthood. And in that phase, everything kind of revolves. And again, I'm speaking from my own experience, not and from what I've observed, but not in like wide generalities. So everything revolves around the kids. And so then if you're lucky, you can kind of work your old friends into, like, you have kids at the same time, but realistically that happens less and less and less. So then you start having kid friends.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to develop these new friendships. And again, they're around, as we were talking about earlier, these different entry points, like kindergarten, right? You kind of, all the dads will get together, the moms will meet, and there is mingling, but again, everyone's making friends again, so to speak. But again, it's still challenging because, I think I saw you write that it takes 200 hours to have like a new good friend or something like that.
Yeah, this is research from Jeffrey Hall at University of Utah, I believe, who said that it takes 90 to 200 hours to go from a stranger to a best friend. So less time certainly to go to a casual friend, but it can take a while to get to best friend status.
Wow, so 90 to 200 hours. So to go back to your question, I think I'm forgetting do you remember your exact question?
What is the thing that brings you together?
Yeah, so I think there was this big gap, and it was this kind of the early days of parenting gap where everyone, and throwing COVID in that for a lot of people, so we kind of went insular. Yeah. And now everyone's starting to kind of reemerge, but people don't want to drink as much. People live in different places. And so there's one thread that I've found in my life. There are a few people that want to make that transition into the third layer of friendship. And it's almost, I would call it the shared midlife crisis. It's like you're having a midlife crisis, I'm having a midlife crisis. Can we support each other in that, knowing that our old tools of, going out to the bar and they don't work. They're ineffective, or we just don't have the capacity to do them anymore. So I'll stop there, but that's kind of that's been a pattern that I've seen in my own friendships that I've observed with others in a similar position.
Yeah, I'd love to empathize with that because it's definitely something that came up in my research for the book. I forgot to mention at the beginning when it was like, oh, how do you introduce them? Something I did that I forget to sometimes contextualize is that I wrote a book about friendship. For those who are listening who don't even know who I am, I wrote this book, We Should Get Together, The Secret to Cultivating Better Friendships. And in the section in there about parenting and about the impact of relationships and family on friendships, absolutely the struggle that you named is there for sure. It's the shift in identity, the shift in availability, the shift in what is a priority to you at that time in your life, the access to your friends, if many of them have moved away or their kids are in a different school district or whatever it might be. There are 4 main barriers I talk about in the book to friendship, but there are also ways to transcend and overcome each of those barriers so that you can log that time with your friends and to get closer. And I will clarify what I said earlier. Dr. Jeffrey Hall is at University of Kansas, not University of Utah. And that realization that when we spend time with people that we want to be closer to, that is one of the critical components of developing a closer friendship and or increasing the amount of vulnerability that we had. So for a lot of us, when we were in high school or college, we not only had tons of time with our friends because we're with them all day and hanging out after school hours and on the weekend and whatever, nights and weekends, but we also had this increased proximity and this increase in frequency. And so what I call in the book hydroponic friendship is like a way to kind of monkey wrench that into the busy adult life is to then share experiences of high vulnerability in concentrated moments of time. And so the way I've seen this happen for many, many hundreds of adults is in any kind of retreat setting or any kind of group learning experience, like people and their grad school friends, right? Or people who go on a week-long off-the-grid meditation retreat, or you know what I mean? Like people who do these like deep, intense experiences where you eat every meal together, you talk about deep shit, you're like sharing your life, your heart. That can cement a friendship much more quickly when you don't have as much time.
Personally, I live in that land of just going deep and asking questions. But how does one, if you're not, let's say, spiritually, and maybe spiritual is not the right word, introspectively oriented, right?
Sure.
You kind of, you have your family, you have your job, you live your life, but actually creating that space and that intentionality for friendship is not something that one is used to. If I went to some of these friends and say, hey, you should go with your MBA students on a trip for a week and really kind of dig deep into these questions, be vulnerable with each other, it would feel too daunting, I suspect. Is shared vulnerability with a peer like a muscle that one needs to cultivate? And if so, like what would be the knee push-up version of that?
Great metaphor. Yes, vulnerability is a skill. And this is one of the things that I was thinking about as we were preparing for this conversation today, with the question of, is friendship as hard as we think, right? When we're with our besties, friendship is easy, right? Especially if you're with your besties and they live close to you, friendship's even easier. But the things that make friendship hard are things that if we peel back the layers a little bit, it's usually something else. So in this case, you're talking about vulnerability. Vulnerability can be difficult or an uncomfortable place, but does that mean friendship is hard or does that mean vulnerability is hard, right? So another example of this would be one thing that a lot of my coaching clients will say is they want to work on inviting people to things or getting a group together. Maybe this is something that they're nervous to do because, oh gosh, fear of rejection is hard. That's true. Courage is hard. That's true. Persistence is hard. That's true. But does that mean friendship is hard? Or is it actually these additional skills that we need to develop so that we can get to the fruit, which is the friendship? But if the challenge is actually around having the courage to be vulnerable, to extend an invitation, or having the courage to potentially face disappointment or rejection if you invite people to stuff and they say no, that's real, that's life. How could we talk about getting more comfortable with that experience? Same thing with the persistence it takes. People are busy. You're going to invite them to stuff. They might not be available. They might turn you down 1, 2, 3 times, but the fourth time they might come through. Or you might need to ask 10 people instead of 5 people. So those dedication and those persistence muscles, yeah, that's hard if you're not used to practicing that. It could be a really uncomfortable place. But does that mean friendship is hard, or does it mean those other skills are actually what's hard?
Wow. Ooh. Well, you just made a viral TikTok moment there, but I'm sitting with everything you just said, because here I am thinking of friendship in a very kind of put two people in a room and talk and hug and cry or what have you. But this podcast is called the Examine Life Podcast, and so all of these things, fear of rejection, persistence, determination, intentionality, courage, right? They're almost proxies for human flourishing. And if you flourish as a human, then by extension, your relationships and your friendships.
Right.
I was pulling on vulnerability, but you put in kind of the fear of rejection, which is one I know our listeners feel. Persistence, or I heard, you didn't say it, but intentionality.
Yeah.
Are there other kind of, if you think of this question of, is friendship really as hard as we think? Is there a framework or kind of a set of buckets that we could look at to kind of really tackle the question instead of using, the F word?
Yes, I love it. Well, I'm a big fan of simplicity, especially focusing on simplicity these days. So today, my answer is the 2 buckets I would pick. I would make it 2 buckets, and it would be emotional and logistics.
Okay.
And let's see what fits in there. So certainly in the emotional bucket, we're the things I was mentioning, right? So vulnerability, courage, dedication, persistence, those things, they can be hard, right? Dealing with fear of rejection can be hard. And those are usually some kind of emotional challenge. It feels like that's what makes, the F word, friendship, hard. But it's really these other things. And then in the logistical bucket are things like whether or not we are geographically close enough to easily access each other, right? So that proximity is a logistical challenge, or time, right? Yeah. If our schedules don't align because we're in different time zones and parents got to put their kids to bed at different times, or they're chauffeuring kids to different things after school, then certainly aligning the time to connect with each other, that's a logistical challenge, right? And that requires some dedication and persistence as well, which goes into the emotional bucket. But those are, I kind of think of them as like structural or logistical challenges more so than the emotional. So those will be the 2 buckets, I would say.
Okay.
But in the book, I have a whole long list of what I call the big buts. And they are the big, like, but this, but that, but the other. When I was interviewing folks to say, what makes friendship hard for you? And those categories were time, work and money, emotional availability, location, the internet, which is just distraction in general. And so most of those, and there was like about 40 things that were in the list of big butts. And there was like, oh, I want to have friends, but everybody moves too much. Or, oh, I want to have friends, but I need alone time to recharge. Or, oh, I want to have friends, but I work too much. Or, things like that.
Wow. Well, what if you did a pie chart of the butts? Was it, was there kind of a dominant one?
I feel like it's pretty split between, time, work and money, emotional availability, and location. And then distraction gets like another slice. But I feel like that one had fewer, even though distraction is dominant in our lives, there were fewer specific ones because those ones are pretty simplistic. And it's usually tied to the internet as the source of all things that suck our attention away.
Yeah. So if we go back, let's stick in the emotional bucket for a little. If you go back to vulnerability. And so if you have 2 people who have been friends on the basis of shared experience for a long time, right? It's the classic, we tell stories when we get together.
Yeah.
I have found that it takes a while to even prime yourself to be emotionally vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so to even be able to have the awareness of what that even looks like for you, let alone two people bringing it together. If two people know each other well, right? They have shared history, known each other for many years. Is there a way to inject a little emotional vulnerability into that friendship? There are kind of like tactics or...
Absolutely. And the wonderful thing about starting from that place of where you already have a longstanding friendship, you already have a connection that's built on trust, right? Acceptance, sticking with each other. The wonderful thing about that place is that you can invite your friends to grow alongside you or to support your own growth, and you can frame it in that way. So let's say, for example, if you and I were friends from 25 years ago, like since school, and we've known each other a long time, and I was wanting to inject more vulnerability into my friendship with you. And I didn't know if you were going to be open to it, because usually we chat about like the same few like life updates. But let's say, I'm really wanting to talk more deep, more emotions. I might say to you, one of the things can I talk to you about something that's been on my heart? And you might say, what would she say if I said, can I talk to you about something I've been thinking about? It's been on my heart.
Please, go ahead.
You'd probably say, yeah, your friend will probably say yes. And I say, one of the things I've been thinking about is how I'm learning and growing and changing at this phase of my life, and how maybe my identity is shifting at this time in my life. Or I'm thinking about the next 40 years, I'm thinking about aging, and I actually want to have a deeper conversation about some of these things I've been thinking about. Is that something that you're open to?
Yes.
Can I share that with you? Okay, yeah, you say it, great. And then from there, you can say, setting the context for this other person to know, why is it important to you? Why does it matter now? Yeah. What are some of the things you've been thinking and feeling? And then to invite them to say, when you hear these things, are these things that you ever think about? How does this land with you? And how open do you feel to us maybe talking about this topic or these kinds of topics more frequently? And when you do that, you're creating an invitation. And I'm really big on invitations. My whole TEDx talk is about the power of invitation. But you're creating an invitation for the other person to either accept or decline or modify. And so, and any of those is an acceptable response. Any of those is an acceptable response to an invite. It's not only yes. And so they can say, yeah, like you were so positive and affirming. You were saying, yeah, tell me more. Please say more about that. I'd love that. And that creates the opportunity then for me to say more, to invite more, et cetera, and to invite you to join me in that space of greater depth and vulnerability. And I have modeled that by going first. So I have reduced your risk by taking on the risk of going first.
Wow. That's really powerful. And I can see that. I could also see, as you're talking, I could see one person just be like, oh, this is getting a little too awkward for me. Or,
And that could happen. And that's okay.
And what does that mean, though? What does that mean? Does that create an imbalance in a friendship? In, let's say, to go back to Aristotle's kind of three level, and someone's trying to move out of the realm of pleasure friendships, experience-based friendships, into friendships of virtue. I think that's the third category. And the other person rejects the invitation. I could see so many flavors of awkwardness, like the person who wants to initiate be like, oh, this person's not on my, my friend's not on my level, and I'm growing and so on. The other person being like, why is he acting so different? Like what happened to the clinging to the nostalgia? It's like, I just love the greatest hits album. Like, why do we need to reinvent our sound at this point in our lives? and I'm saying this because with men, at some point, I'd love to talk about the difference, the gendered differences, because I know, I joke with my wife, like with men, it's like really easy. It's like you put two cavemen in, they're like, they beat their chest. Like, you like beer? I like beer. You like surf? I like surf. Okay, let's be friends, And like, it's like that simple. And then meanwhile, I see with like, and again, and this is in my wife's friend group, there's just a lot of like, what's happening on Instagram, and there's these social clicks forming. And then she's like, how come you guys you guys don't ever have any issues. You just like, we just want to go surfing, But if one person wants to up level a friendship and then another person has hesitance to it, like it's almost like fractures the friendship to some regards, because you kind of subconsciously might want different things out of the friendship at that point. Like, how does one deal with that kind of different desires of friendship?
Yeah, so it's data. It's data. When someone says, "Oh, thank you for offering me that," I'm not in the mood for that. That's not, what I would like to have today. And so it's disappointing, but it's data. And it prevents you from spending your time pouring all of this energy and time and attention and chasing this goal with someone who does not share your goal, right? It's like kind of like dating. It's like if one person wants to just keep it light and someone else wants to get serious and settle down. And do you really want to spend time chasing someone who actually does not want the same goal as you? And so it doesn't mean you need to end that friendship at all. But what it does mean is like you might want to turn your attention in another direction. You might want to try with somebody else, whether that's a different long-term friend that you've had, or you might actually need to just make a new friend that comes from a place of we want to do something deeper together. So one example of that, a buddy of mine has been in his Mankind men's group for like over a decade. And because the container at his Mankind men's group is set, it's like, we're going to talk about the deep stuff in here. He doesn't have to doubt. He doesn't have to question if it's okay to go deep in that space, because that is exactly what it is for. And by joining the group, he knows he's going to meet other guys who have that same goal, right? Yeah. And so it doesn't mean like every friend has to meet every single emotional need that you have. Just like one romantic partner cannot possibly meet every single emotional need that you have. Like, you need other people in your life. Yeah. And if someone says, I actually just want to talk about sports and drink beer and go surfing. Great. Thank you for clarifying that, right?
There's a sadness that comes with that when, one person might be ready for the next level of friendship and the other person is not, right? And I think, it's like, oh, but we've known each other for 25 years.
Right.
It's like, I think, actually, as you're saying it, there's this kind of like false dichotomy. It's like, well, I don't have 25 years to make a new friend of that kind of shared experience level.
Sure.
But I could even observe that in my own life, I have become, and I'm sure you've seen this in many different ways, I've become really, really close friends with people in the span of 2 to 3 years. And we might never have drank a beer together, even though drinking played a very active role in my social life for the, early adulthood. And so, it isn't like one's worse or one's better. It just, there's no judgment on it. And there's also this recognition that like we evolve as friends.
Right. So 2 things there. Yeah. One, we do evolve as friends, and what a gift it is to make friends at this stage of your life who meet you as who you are now and who you're trying to be tomorrow. And they have no expectation that you're going to be whoever you were yesterday, right? That's one of the benefits of saying, wow, this is the benefit of having a new friend in your life who maybe you did meet in the 1, 2, 3 years ago, but that is the huge place of opportunity and potential that they hold for you, Yeah. And the other thing that I want to touch on is the word ready. So you said, you brought this up maybe with the friend from 20 years ago, and they're like, not interested, or not ready. Doesn't mean they won't become ready. It doesn't mean that in 6 months or a few years or a year that they might not be like, I want to circle back to something you said because actually I'm ready now.
Beautiful. And I've seen too with certain friends, they plant a little seed of vulnerability. It's like a little passing comment. It might be like, I never like to talk about death or, but I know I should, or something like that, right? Or I hate thinking about bad things happening, but it's inevitable that it's going to happen, right? And so they're almost thinking aloud, but it is this kind of invitation, especially if that might be that's something that you think about often. You ruminate on those topics. And so I love what you said, these invitations. And probably the invitations can be very subtle. It's not like, hey, I want someone to go super deep with me. Like, which one of you are down for that? Like the Instagram post. looking for my homies to go deep with me, or like,
Who wants to come over and talk about our mortality?
exactly.
It's like that scene in Barbie where she's like, do you guys ever think about dying?
I haven't seen, but I have heard reference to that one. So I think it is. And again, it's a life skill, not even a friendship skill, to have the awareness of these very subtle invitations, these breadcrumbs that people might drop for you that really give you a clue of their yearning.
Can I add one thing to
please.
that? So one way that you can drop a breadcrumb with somebody that takes down your level of risk, but you can kind of like test the waters out is, and this might be up your alley because I know you like to share valuable things to read or listen to with the people in your community, is to share a piece of content with them, right? Maybe it's a podcast or a movie or a book or an article that's about the topic that you maybe do want to open it up, but you just want to see like, how do they respond if I say like, hey, I read this really interesting thing, or, oh, I listened to this interesting podcast. You should maybe check this out, and then gauge their level of reaction to it, their interest with it, and that might be the thing that opens the door.
That's so good. You're giving me goosebumps on that, and especially, well, A, because I built a business around that, but B, it has this extra superpower. It has this extra special sauce to it, in that it adds an intermediary.
Yes.
Which could make the person put their guard down or feel more comfortable. And I'll tell you, like the early days of Rad Reads, I was curating articles, and they were articles about things that I was thinking about, but I didn't have the confidence to say this is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Because I was a new writer, I was just new to the whole entrepreneurship. So instead, I was like, this person shares this view of mine. I wasn't even saying that. I'm like, this person has this cool idea. This person has this cool idea. This person has this cool idea. And then over time, it was like, I have this cool idea, but it took years.
Yeah.
And that barrier was healthy for all parties. It was healthy for me to put some distance and build up my own readiness to share those things. And it was a good barrier for the receiving end to be like, I don't want to engage with K at this level, but these ideas are interesting to me. And so it's like a nice little buffer. So I love that you point that out. And that might be a good segue to some of the more in the logistics container. But I want to go back to this fear of rejection. And I want to share this story. This happens to everyone often, happened to me recently.
Yeah.
I'm texting a new friend about, either sharing them something or, hey, it was cool following up, meeting, we should do this sometime. And then they ghost you. Right? And then you're like, oh, like, did I see a friendship that they didn't see? Did I have something stuck in my teeth? And, all the stories just fill up that empty space, that well of insecurity that one might possess in that moment. And then you get a text out of the blue, and they're like, oh, shoot, sorry, I forgot to respond to this. In one case, this happened to a friend of mine. They were really insecure about this. And they're like, sorry, I've gone dark. I just got divorced. And so it's been a crazy 3 months. And my friend was like, I thought we were like really hitting it off. Like, no, this person got divorced. Like they were all in on some other topic. So rejection is so scary. What was the role that this fear of rejection played in kind of your learnings on friendship?
Yeah, so it is very, very real. And I have a section about dealing with fear of rejection in this whole blog post I have about how to try to spark a new friendship this week. And the thing I will say about the role that it plays is like, A, as you said, it is ubiquitous. Like I have probably only met like one person in my life who has zero fear of rejection. Or fear of being told no, or of like not being received the way that, you mostly hope to be received. So A, it's totally natural. It's totally normal. It's very human. There's nothing wrong with that. And B, the other thing I would say is like, after spending so many years, so I worked on the book for 5 years, and I got to know the ins and outs of a lot of people's emotional lives when it came to friendship, and to understand like what is at play when XYZ happens. And one of the things that I didn't anticipate, but then I walked away with, is almost like it's a little bit of a skill or ability that I picked up by proxy, which is that if I text someone and I don't hear back from them, I almost never take it personal anymore. Because what I know from having spent so many years like with people in the trenches of like what is happening in your life, your relationships, your work, your friendships, etc., is that everybody has something going on. And usually there's a good reason why they may not have gotten back to you. Like they said, like your friend was getting a divorce. And so his bandwidth was completely eaten up by that. And that had nothing to do with actually intentionally rejecting this other person. It's really just our interpretation of a behavior. But we can choose a painful interpretation, or we can choose a non-painful interpretation, or we can choose to not put any interpretation on it at all. That's really hard because we do tend to take things personally. To get ghosted is so mysterious because our minds want to close the gap. They want to have a reason why. We want to understand our world. And a ghosting situation, or when someone's text goes dark, what it does is it creates a mystery in our world. And because we really want an answer, not just to the text, but to know, well, like, why, what's happening? And we may or may not always get that answer. It's a really painful kind of limbo to be stuck in. But what I encourage people to think is like, it's not about you. And if it is, it's that other person's responsibility to tell you so. Or it's something else in their life is pulling them in another direction.
I think I study a decent amount of Eastern philosophy. And so much of it is observing your mind.
Yes.
And when you observe your mind, when there's these vacuums, like there's a room for a story, like a ghost, the mystery.
Yes.
Your mind will just, like me. And usually it kind of, it hits out a core wound, a core deep insecurity. And the fear of rejection is a fear that many people share, is one of unlovability, right? I'm not worthy of love. Right. And then it's crazy that you could go from a ghosted text with a friend to like question your worthiness of love. But that's some version of that's happening at the subconscious level, if that's a fear that you share, that you have. And so I love to, it's like, that's where a lot of, for me, a lot of kind of meditation, observing thoughts, the work of Tara Brach, for example, is really powerful in that, where you just observe it. You don't try to fix it. You don't let the stories fill up the space. You just watch the thoughts go in and out. It's a really powerful one. Filed in the easier said than done category. Wanted so we'll go to logistics, and I don't have time. I mean, that's not me. I'm speaking. I mean, I have okay amounts of time. But the common, people will say, I don't have time to read a book. I don't have time to go to the gym. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to take your productivity class. I don't have, and so maintaining friendships is difficult. And then we're talking about level 3 virtue friends. Like you might need to go make some new ones because the existing group might not want to move in that direction, right? You may or may not, right? How on And, in my peer group, we're kind of emerging from that young kids haze, like, until someone always said, until your youngest can put their own seatbelt on, then you're still in the haze. And so, like I just crossed out of that haze, after 9 years. How does one deal with, this perceived lack of time and these relationships that we didn't even talk about the health benefits of friendship, but they seem to be pretty well documented across many different, researchers, that one of the keys to a healthy life is to have good friends, close friends.
Yeah. And in fact, the longest longitudinal study done by Harvard around happiness for human beings found that more than any other thing that you can do in your life, having healthy relationships is the number one thing. And friendships are key in that picture of what it means to have healthy relationships.
So it's like, I think they compared someone not having friends to smoking 12
15 cigarettes a day.
Yeah. 15 cigarettes a day. So, so this question of time, how did that show up in your research and in the people you spoke to?
So it showed up in a few different ways. Certainly one of the ways that time shows up is, as you have described, when you are a parent, particularly with young kids, and also juggling a professional working life, there's going to be so many demands on your time that it is absolutely just a necessary fact of life that friendships often get kind of pushed to the side, pushed to the wayside. And that's a part of how we deal with it. And one of the things that we can do to deal with that is to think about adaptability and kind of like morphing the shape that friendships take in our life. So, for example, in that kind of situation, you may find yourself, I'm hearing David Byrne, you may find yourself realizing that asynchronous hangouts or synchronous hangouts are harder to do, right? Simply due to proximity, frequency, distance, schedules aligning, all of the different demands on your time. So asynchronous may not work, or synchronous may not work. So asynchronous connection might be the thing that works for you. It might be using an app like Marco Polo where you're just trading little snippets, like little videos back and forth, and you release the expectation. You say to this person, you know what, for the next 6 to 12 months, I don't know if I can have a real-time conversation with you at all, but I would love to keep in touch by sending these little snippets, little videos back and forth, and we just play like little volleyball, little tennis, whether it takes one day to get back or a week to get back or a month to get back. Let's keep the ball in the air and let's try it this way and just release ourselves from the pressure. If we hang out face-to-face, great. It's a cherry on top of the icing. But if we don't, let's just do this instead. The other thing that
audio
notes too, yes,
works really well.
They're my fave. And then the other thing, and this comes up a lot. So as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of my audience and readers and followers, subscribers are folks who are child-free by choice, like myself. Probably not a surprise there. And one of the things that is a very just practical reality that we have to accept is that we have less demands on our time than people who have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 9-year-old or whatever it might be. And so think about, for a limited amount of time, which is like basically until their kids are a little bit more independent, you're probably going to have to put in more effort to maintain that friendship. And it's going to be imbalanced for a little while. But if you want to keep that friend in your life, is it not worth it? So one of the ways that I do this, and it's really quite joyful, is one of my besties has 2 kids under the age of 5. She has her hands full. Her and her husband are busy. She's in it. She's like got 2 kids hanging on her 25 hours a day. She doesn't even have a second. And I'm joking, right? She probably feels like she has 25 hours a day. But so one of the things that we do is we meet at the park on Saturday mornings at like the tot lot that's like kind of got the little fence around it. So the kids can play, but they can't escape. And we can see them and we know they can't escape, but we can have a grown-up one-on-one conversation while also being present with her kids.
I love that.
And it's one of my favorite weekly rituals. And they're like, hey, Auntie Kat. And I'm like, hey, what's up, y'all? And I love them. And it's really, really sweet to build this relationship, not just with her, but also with her kids, and to find a way to fit our time together into also what needs to fit her life as a mom of 2 young kids.
Oh, I love that. And I love that for you and your friend. I think because I noticed that imbalance a lot, the people who are in it. And as you know, with your friend, like when you're in that phase, I mean, you are just surviving, right?
Yeah.
It is hard. But at the same time, and I'm guilty of this, where I have my single friends or my friends who don't have kids, and I just assume, and this is, I don't like that I do this, but I just assume that they will be more flexible. and then they will, sometimes they overtly resent me for it. Like they'll just like call me out. But mostly they'll quietly resent me for it. And it like shows up in like a passive aggressive. And so my question, and this is a very selfish question, is like, what can I do as someone who very much is in it? And how can I show the respect and appreciation for my friends who don't have kids while still recognizing that there's a natural imbalance in flexibility without taking advantage of that, right? So I'd love to hear, I'd love some advice on that, because I know that we're all self-centered beings, and then when you have 2 little ones on top of that, your self-centered meter goes through the roof because you're just, there's just 3 of you. But at the same time, I've irritated enough people with that I don't want to be that person, and I want to show up with respect and empathy for like, look, just because I have kids and you don't, like, doesn't mean X, Y, Z.
Yeah. So a couple of things you can do there. So one is to be as open with your friends as you were with me just now in acknowledging the imbalance, acknowledging that, it doesn't feel great to them, it doesn't feel great to you, and there's something that you want to do about that, right? And so you can approach it as an acknowledgement of the issue, an acknowledgement of their feelings, which is a great show of empathy and understanding, and then to say, can we talk about this together? Can we come up with some kind of solution together that kind of works for the both of us? And to invite them to problem solve it with you while also honoring their feelings. Another way that you can go about it is if you have already gotten a lot of information and clarity from them about what they want, that they're not getting their needs met, or their love language because you've known them for so long, it's like you can just do the thing that would make them happier. So if their love language is like words of affirmation, maybe you just take a minute out of your day to send them a voice note with your words. Doesn't cost any money and it barely costs any time to literally tell them with your words how much you cherish them, how much you value them, how much it pains you to not be able to do more, and how much it pains them too, but to let them know that they are not valued any less due to this lack of availability that you have. And that might go a really, really long way to affirm the commitment and value that you have for that person and that friendship.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Because you could get so wrapped up in your own shit that you
can spend more time worrying about it in your head than just saying the thing.
Yeah,
right.
I love that, and that's great advice. What about you? You mentioned a word that I think I love in this concept of friendship is rituals.
Yes.
So you have this ritual with your friend in the park. Are there other rituals? Maybe I'm particularly curious and kind of for people who are not geographically in the same place. I know people will do like an annual guys trip or an annual gals trip, or what have you found to be, effective rituals for folks?
The fun thing about a ritual is that it can fit into any amount of time that you have. So it can be a 1-minute ritual that you do, every day at 11:11 p.m. Maybe your ritual is that you send a message of appreciation via text to a friend,
I'm sound asleep.
I'm child free. I'm up at 11:11. Another ritual could be big and audacious, like this week-long trip that you do with your buddies, and you get away in a plane and you go somewhere together and you rent out a house, and it's just like 24/7 friend time. That's the big version of a ritual. But no matter what the amount of time is, and also with distance. So one ritual I had for about I was pen pals with this bestie that I mentioned. We were pen pals for about 9 years after we initially met volunteering together. And our ritual was that we mailed letters to each other. And so we had very few synchronous conversations in that time. We lived in 2 different countries, but we mailed letters to each other. And then eventually now we live in the same town. And so it's like we get a 3-hour ritual at the park every Saturday morning. And so it feels like so luxurious to say, I get to spend 2 to 3 hours a week with my bestie. And it's like, because we live close to each other. But during the 9 years that we didn't, we wrote letters to each other.
Yeah.
And so with another friend of mine from college, we traded a journal back and forth where she bought this journal and she wrote letters to me in it. And then I wrote back to her in the book and I mailed it back. And we did that for a number of years as well. And so there are ways to still share very deeply in ways that don't feel like a demand on your day-to-day, every single day scheduled time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I had 2 rituals that stick for me. One is people's birthdays. So I have everyone's birthday in my to-do list, and I just send them a video.
Yeah.
And so right there, it ensures that at least I keep in touch with people once a year, right? And that's that's pretty good for a lot of friendships. The other one is with a few groups of friends when we get together. At the end of the hang, we pull out our phones. And we schedule the next one, because so much of that friction is the back and forth text. Fuck, make these texts go. I hate these texts so much. And you can do it 6 weeks, 2 months in advance, where you've got so much open space on your calendar. And it's actually with the thing that you want most. Whereas, someone hits you up on Twitter like, hey, you wanna talk? You want to grab coffee? You look at your calendar. You're like, okay, I'm free in 6 days. Like, sure, take that slot. Where you're like, I could have been hanging out with my friends.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you do it. The booking before you leave. I have a blog post about that called like take a tip from the salon. It's like they cut your hair, they never let you leave without making your next point. Same with the dentist, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like it eliminates so much of that friction of will you get together again? And it also eliminates the opportunity to feel doubt that they want to see you again. Because sometimes, especially when building a new friendship, if you depart and you haven't mutually agreed on like, hey, let's do this again. Let's pick a date. So much doubt comes in for folks at that place of like, we have left. When can I text them again? Do they want to see me again? How long should I wait? How soon should I ask to hang out again? If more than 3 weeks have gone by, oh my God, is it too late to ever text them again? You know, all of these questions and doubts come in. Whereas if you just check and see, do you want to do this again? You know, let's pick a time. Yeah, let's pick a time. And then it's all done. It's ready. Now you have something to look forward to.
Oh, beautiful. So last question, and this might be a little bit of a juicy one, which is there ever a point in our life when it doesn't make sense to make new friends? Like is making friends a lifelong journey or part of us? What does the research say? What do your conversations say? And for context, because again, I think that I have a few friends that are like, I'm good on friends.
Yeah. Some people are totally hashtag no new friends.
Yeah. I'm like, you want to meet this cool person? Nope. I got my friends. I got my family. I'm good on friends. And some of my closest friendships are people I've met in the past 5 years. So what did you learn about like, when do we stop? Should we stop making new friends? When do we stop?
So the number of friends that you can reasonably maintain in your life is certainly a subjective measure. And someone like yourself, it sounds like, is very open to making new friends, especially, I know you've talked about in some of the previous episodes, like some of your greatest friends lately came from people you met online, you know, in the last year or 2, 3 years. And that's amazing. And some people have less capacity to hold a lot of friendships, or it feels kind of overwhelming to hold a lot of friendships and acquaintanceships at the same time. So it's a very subjective measure, and there isn't like one right answer for everybody. With that said, the research of Robin Dunbar has found that on average, adults will typically kind of like matriculate 1 to 2 friends a year. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you lost those friends through a fight. Usually the friendships fade away, either because someone moved away or they've completely fallen out of touch. It's just kind of like slowly like fades to gray. And it's not like faded to black. You're like, I think the friendship still exists, but it's completely like removed from the day-to-day of life. And if we're losing approximately 1 friend a year, 1 to 2 friends a year, and if you have a small friend group to begin with, in a few years, you're going to need some new friends. And so with that being the case and being completely normal, so don't beat yourself up if you feel like, oh, I lost a friend last year and the friend the year before that. It just means that we do need the skill of knowing how to make new friends and of having openness. And I think openness is a type of muscle and skill as well, to say, I'm willing to try again. I'm willing to let another person into my life. I'm willing to be surprised, to be so pleasantly surprised that I might actually love a new friend or make a new bestie in these years that are left in my life. And so with that, one of the things that you can do if you're trying to shorten the amount of time that it takes to go from strangers to close friends is to put yourself in the situation where you can join any kind of group or people who value the same things you value are already there. People who are committed, whether it's to self-growth, to physical fitness, to spiritual growth, to environment, like causes you care about. Put yourself in a group that meets regularly with people that value the same things you do, and it will be much, much easier to add a new friend or two to your life each year of your life.
Beautiful. Oh, Kat, this has been, I want to just like go out and hug and text all my friends and you. And this has been just so just nourishing to the soul. I think, everything makes so much sense, but it also feels so unattainable or complicated at the same time. And so you have this like wonderful knack for kind of lighting a spark, right? Creating an invitation and an opening, while also leaving the space for every listener, myself included, to carve their own path out of that openness and out of that invitation. But the thing that you've made very clear, you've given us that invitation and that opening to see what's in store for us. How do we love better? I always think about I forget, it's one of these books on, that where a nurse or a palliative care nurse spends time with folks who are dying. And one of the questions that always comes up is, did I love well? Right. And that's kind of, being immersed in your career and all that, you're just like, oh, did I buy a house at the right age and all that? But, at the end of the day, did I love well? It's a very powerfully guiding question. And obviously, the definition of love is very open, right? As to who, what, when, where, and how, right?
Right. I love this. This takes us back full circle to the question you asked at the beginning, like, what I feel like connection, friendship is. And it's really, I think it's a type of love.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really being driven by love. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, I love this conversation. I'm so happy we got to share this.
Thank you so much. You have the tools to help us navigate this messy world of adult friendships. Where can people go learn more about you? Tell us about the book and any other places you want our listeners to go find you.
Absolutely. So my website is weshouldgettogether.com. And there you can check out the things I have for individuals or for companies who want to bring more connection into their teams and into their companies. But usually with individuals who are looking for my work, there's certainly the book, which is available anywhere you buy books, or you can grab the ebook at my site. I have a membership group called Connection Club for adults who want to intentionally cultivate more friendship and community in their lives. And you don't want to do it alone. You would love some support with that. So you will get support from me and the other folks in the group who are working on their goals as well. It's a wonderful, supportive community to learn alongside people with individual goals. So some people are maybe running a meetup. Some folks are moving to a new city and need to start from scratch. Whatever it might be, come on in with what your goal is and we'll help you get it done. Definitely hop onto my newsletter, which is at the website, and I send that out a few times a month with different tools, resources, and invitations to come learn more about making friends and also to make new friends at my gatherings, which is a great place to do that. Oh yeah, and in my shop, I have a ton of tools for connection as well. The Better Conversations calendar is in there, all kinds of good stuff. The Better Than Small Talk cards are in there. Would love to help you have greater connections with your friends at any stage of life, no matter where you are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kat. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate this conversation. And I know that our listeners are going to be so moved by it. And it's going to create some better friendships.
Same. Thank you so much. Reach out anytime. I would love to connect with you again. And anyone who's listening, feel free to be in touch. I would love to help you have a wonderful, joyful friendship life. Yeah, in adulthood.
Hey, Kat. Thank you.
Bye-bye.